Hillary has been lengthening her excuses as to why she lost the election. She didn't really lose the election. It was stolen from her by, I think it's up to 24 different excuses she has now. Number 24 is content farms in Macedonia. And as I said, my grandfather was a Macedonian content farmer, and we often think about, gathering on the porch and recalling the old days on the Macedonian he never thought that the old content farmers he left behind in Macedonia would one day steal the U.S. presidential election. They are gnarled, hard-working Macedonian peasants, and the way they were able to reach out and steal the election.
On July 15, about 2 weeks from now, Macedonians will vote for a new parliament and prime minister. In the midst of the current campaigning, the coronavirus rages on. Over 300 Macedonians have now died from the virus, with thousands more infected, and the numbers continue to go up. Macedonia has one of the highest rates per million citizens in the region, currently at around 150 deaths per million. As a result, while the EU opens up to travelers, Macedonians will not be allowed in the EU. In the midst of the campaigning, the scandals continue, too numerous to list in this opening monologue. The current government, ostensibly led by Zoran Zaev and his party, which Euronews in a story today called, quote, the North Macedonian Social Democratic League, unquote, continues to ignore the scandals, the raging virus, and the weakening economy. And if all that was not enough, the government of Macedonia adopted a, quote, state of crisis, unquote, on Tuesday, June 30, and lasting for 30 days, owing to the increasing illegal immigrant crisis. We'll discuss all of this and more on this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the middle of Tucson, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin Suleimanov calling in from Skopje, Macedonia.
You know, that's kind of in the world of chaos swirling around us in the United States and Macedonia and Europe, around the world. We didn't add any descriptions there, talking about where I'm coming from or where you're coming from, which we've been doing over the past couple of months. So I think that's kind of refreshing, Cvetin.
Or maybe we just got used to the fact that, nothing works, everything is collapsing. I mean, when the locusts come or, the next plague, I'll make sure to mention it. But currently we're still on the last updated plague, and that's still ongoing.
Yes, I've been talking about the fires here, which are at least half under control now, which is good news. We're recording this on Tuesday, the last day of June 2020, Tuesday, June 30. As I mentioned, the elections are on July 15, so this podcast, episode 77, will drop tomorrow, Wednesday, July 1. 2 weeks, elections, coronavirus, scandals. Let's talk. I see that Zaev and Miskolsky had a debate on TV tonight there. How'd that go?
Yeah, it just concluded. Zaev was pretty nervous throughout, his usual bluster and, low-brow approach. Miskolsky was trying to be professorial and above it all, and he thinks that's gonna do him well with the voters who are getting sick of Zaev. Or, that's just the way the person is. I mean, Miskolsky is in a different class, obviously, from Zaev. One interesting thing Zaev threw out was that he said that, we're going to win, we're going to have 55 seats, you're going to have 48, Vamara. And now, currently, Zaev is campaigning against DUI for the Albanian vote, but in a strange way in which, DUI have obviously outflanked him from the Albanian nationalist right, because they're Albanians and Zaev still isn't. And they said, we want an Albanian member of parliament. So this obviously hurts Zaev with ethnic Albanians. So he's now, he's saying one thing to ethnic Albanian voters when he speaks in Albanian TV stations, but to Macedonians, he's now blustering, against DUI, trying to drum up support among Macedonians against DUI, even though, he gave up everything and the family farm over the past 3 years. And so now he said, I'm going to win, but if I'm like 6 members of parliament short, you, Vimero, should give me 6 members of parliament so I can form a government so I'm not blackmailed by Dewey. I will still have Dewey on board or some other Albanian party, but, you prop me up so we Macedonians stick together. And then he says, if you win, he made it very complicated, but he said, and I might even give you, Mickovsky, 13 seats, which you will lack if you win 48, and you form a government, and I will help you not get blackmailed by Dewey. And so it's a strange comment, but it's usually Gruevski said it as well when Zaev was pushing the Tirana platform. He would say, okay, so we're not blackmailed by Albanians into name change, into changing the constitution or the structure of the country into binational. I'm going to support a minority SDSM government. You just reject the Tirana platform, and Zaev rejected this. So usually the losing side sometimes has made this proposition in the past, or the side which feels it won't be able to form a government. So basically Zaev made this to Mickovsky. It is, it's going to be received well, I suppose, by some Macedonians who are asking, whenever we have elections, we have this question, why can't we Macedonians get along? But it's also, in reality, it's usually made by the losing side. And if Zaev loses, he's going to say, okay, I will give you my members of parliament and I will prop you up, but in exchange, grant me immunity from prosecution and stuff like that. And Mickovsky basically said, I'm going to take your members of parliament anyway, because, many will not, especially in the ethnic minorities, the Roma, the Serbs, the Turks, etc. They're not going to want to stay on the sinking ship if you lose. So I will get them anyway. I don't need to ask for your permission. So this was the big exchange.
That's a very good summary. Zaev sounds like a desperate man. I think he is a desperate man, owing to a whole host of issues. It is interesting that he's playing the quote unquote Macedonian unity card there, as you talk about.
It's a joke.
When in fact he already, as you said, gave away the farm. He gave away everything with the Tirana platform, the Prespa agreement, the agreement with Bulgaria, etc. It's that ship has left the train station, to mix my metaphors. And so, at that point, what does it matter? He's just showing through those comments and through those statements that he is just desperate to cling to power, which I guess is not surprising. I did notice that you mentioned that Dewey is campaigning for a ethnic Albanian prime minister. In a free and fair election, if the majority of Macedonian citizens voted for a Macedonian Albanian prime minister, that's the way it works. But that's not going to happen, and it won't happen. So the demand that there be an ethnic Albanian prime minister is ridiculous. Of course, they're also asking now for a change in the national anthem, and I can't help but think, and I don't want to get too deep into the woods or the weeds on, comparing what's going on in Macedonia to what's going on in the United States, but there's a push here among the far left, and even just some what you might call middle of the road leftists, to change the name of the United States of America, change the flag, change the anthem. Yep. The current reigning candidate for an anthem change is John Lennon's "Imagine," which is not even a good song. It's just it's a piece of bubblegum. It's meaningless. It's vapid. It's actually grotesque.
It's actually pretty dangerous. It's not just meaningless.
Oh, yeah.
It's actually very dangerous.
You're right. No, it is. So anyway, but going back to the elections in Macedonia. So Zaev sounds like a desperate man. He is a desperate man, and that is owing a lot to the current situation And, as I need to mention this, as I wrote in my column last week, why it's time for a Macedonian prime minister, because Macedonia hasn't had a
No.
Macedonian prime minister the past 3.5 years. Um, I think Macedonians will vote on the economy and jobs, the current scandals, the coronavirus and health in general, education. And while the name issue is of vital importance to Macedonians, I wrote in the column that I think it's lower down on the list of priorities for the very simple reason, it's totally understandable, that most Macedonians go through daily life just talking about Macedonia and seeing the word Macedonia and talking about the Republic of Macedonia. They never see the N word. They never talk about the N word. So to them, it doesn't affect them on a daily basis. That is happening outside of Macedonia, and of course with the government of Macedonia, etc., which is a longer-term issue, which we can talk about. But they're going to, Macedonians are going to vote on, pocketbook issues and taking care of their children, taking care of their families, feeding their families, putting clothes on their backs, sending them to school, taking a vacation once or twice a year. These are just basic issues that most people in a normal democracy would vote on. And while I don't call Macedonia a normal democracy, owing to the current state of the government, it does have a process in place for electing leaders, and that's what we're going through now, and that's what most people are going to vote on. But since we mentioned and talked about the scandals, let's talk about some of those the scandals that we seem to talk about every week. You mentioned before on our pre-chat call here, we talked a little bit about the current one with a Montenegrin businessman.
Yeah.
Is that correct? What's going on there?
Just to complete your previous point, I'll just note that the Greeks have been very quiet on the name change issue. They're not pushing us to put the plaques on the monuments and stuff like that more aggressively. And the Bulgarians would have a flare up every now and then, but often with the more fringe members of parliament. So they would be smart, and they're smart, and they're not going to push Zaev at the moment while he has elections, because they would embarrass him and weaken him. But then once it's over and they have elections and they want to bluster, they will definitely push us. So yeah, they're keeping quiet at the moment, but that's tactically to help Zaev, not because all the issues have gone away, but just as you said, not to surface in the public mind here. The Montenegrin guy, I didn't know about him. I didn't follow closely all the story about the Russian coup in Montenegro, but he was allegedly a big part of this. It was in 2016. We had our own problems at the time. I remember there were a bunch of arrests of opposition officials in Montenegro on the day of elections, because they were allegedly going to not recognize the outcome of the elections, try to kill or detain Djukanovic, the everlasting Montenegrin president for life, and they were going to prevent the country's joining of NATO. This was how it was described, I think, in The Guardian, or I think it was laughably some of the leftist newspapers in the West which uncovered the plot. Apparently this guy called Miodrag Davidovic, he was apparently a funder of the opposition in Montenegro, which is pro-Serbian and pro-Russian, opposed NATO membership, and he has he ran one of the two big metal works in Montenegro, the Nikšić steel mill. He was an intelligence officer, so this is how, state security person, so this is how he became a businessman in Montenegro, like usually the way the Balkan oligarchs are created. Recently just survived an assassination attempt. He was part of Djukanovic's posse and then broke ranks with him and was about to be arrested. So he moves between Serbia and Montenegro, supports the Serbian church in Montenegro financially, rebuilt the Ostrog monastery, which is the most important monastery in Montenegro. And in Macedonia, he apparently bought some land near Štip and was going to build wind and solar or wind and hydro plants, and some land in Tetovo. He's also a real estate developer, so he was going to build buildings. And he gave 300,000 euros to the to Zoran Milevsky, Zoki Kichevets,
Oh, yes.
one of the persons in the racket scandal who is in every single scandal, and he's recorded everything, and he's currently cooperating with Zaev. So he's giving Zaev conversations, recordings of his conversations with Mitskovsky. There is not much there, but he's doing this. But apparently someone else has been recording Kichevets as well. So there was his conversation with this Montenegrin guy who paid 300,000 euros, and in exchange he got a meeting with Zaev. Zaev promised to get another of his dodgy characters, the Secretary General of the government, Dragi Rashkovsky, to look into if he can give him a favorable concession to build these plants. And once you build them, the government has to purchase your electricity at a set price, which is very favorable. So this is a very lucrative business if you can get the permit, if you can be one of the few companies which get the leases. Mm-hmm. And so it's a corruption scandal. This guy is very angry on the phone with Kichevets. He says, I met with Zaev and nothing came out of it. You did not approve my request. And the Kichevets says, okay, let's organize another meeting. And the Montenegrin guy says, no, he's going to extort money from me again. He's going to ask me to pay for his stupid referendum campaign. So apparently Zaev was asking money from businessmen who want to get a government contract to pay money to him. And he was using the name change referendum in 2018 as an excuse. He would say, I need money to buy voters, so they support the name change and we join NATO. So on one hand, the businessman didn't want to give money, give more money to Zaev because he obviously figured that Zaev is not going to be true to his word. He probably didn't want to fund this campaign either, being presented as a pro-Russian businessman to fund something that will end up with Macedonia joining NATO. But the most interesting part is that Zaev was willing to take money from the person who, a lot in the media here in Macedonia at the time, in the pro-Zaev media, said, this is the evidence of the Russian collusion we've been talking about. We tried to say Vimera was colluding with Russia. Nobody believed us. But you see in Montenegro, they're really colluding. So Zaev was willing to take money from the person funding the Russian collusion in the region, this is why the scandal is so damaging for Zaev. He was willing to allow Russian interests into Macedonia just so he would get his own cut in the whole deal.
Wow. And that just broke today, yes?
But 2 days ago, I think. Today was
but the news,
the first time the Montenegrin pro-Russian, pro-Serbian guy responded, and he said, well, I wouldn't call it a bribe. It was more like a consulting fee service for facilitation of a major investment. Okay.
Yeah, right. Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, that's ironic in many different ways. I don't think and today, again, we're recording this on Tuesday, so we missed a lot of the Dan Donchev stuff from last week, from our last podcast. He was accused of, actually there were some videos of him actually taking money from somebody across the table, putting it into a satchel, a bag, and then he said he was going to address that issue and basically came out and denied everything and said that this is a political witch hunt against him. What else can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it was a dialysis company which had a contract, was providing the services. So then Donchev was using his power to approve payment for the services timely, or a little late, or a lot late, or extremely late.
Right.
And obviously you can't sue the government healthcare provider, because if you do, then they'll just cancel your contract once it expires. They'll make sure you don't get it again. So this is why many private companies who work with the government are very reluctant to sue the government. So Donchev was demanding the bribes just to, pay the company for the services it provided. Mm-hmm. And also, once the company said, okay, screw this, we're getting out of here, they wanted to sell to a major Swedish company, which they believed could not be bullied around. Donchev tried to prevent this, force the dialysis provider to, to be sold to an Albanian company, which was apparently close to him. And once this failed, he wanted a cut of the money. So this is how he operated. But the interesting part in the recordings which surfaced was that the company, to protect itself, they hired Zoran Zaev's lawyer, Medarski. So basically, Donchev is fuming on the phone. He says, I'm sending the police on these people. I want to, pressure them. I want to, tighten the screws on them. But they got Medarski to represent them. So now I'm going to Zaev with my end of the story, and Medarski is going to Zaev with his, protecting this company. And we are now fighting over Zaev, who would get Zaev's ear, so we can, who would get the influence through Zaev, so he can approve, a police raid. And he says, I got Zaev to approve a police raid against them to pressure them, but then Medarski is trying to sabotage me. So this is how, Zaev's people, the people around him, are fighting each other to, who would extort, they're playing a good cop, bad cop routine with companies. They want to, you want a government contract, in one case, in one instance, you donate to Zaev for the referendum, I'm making quotation marks. In the other case, you want the government contract, well, you want to keep your government contract, well, you're going to either have to give money to Zaev's lawyer or to Zaev's childhood friend and major healthcare director, then Donchev, and
former.
This, this is where your profits go. So Donchev was questioned. Shortly afterwards, the police actually does not run the prosecution, but they can gather evidence based on publicly available information. So they had Donchev for questioning, then they had Mickovsky for questioning, and for a while I was not sure whether this is a revenge, arrest of Mickovsky. Mickovsky said, I'm not coming, he sent a lawyer. It's because of this ridiculous moment when, essentially SDSM sent the police, the riot police, in a restaurant while Mickovsky was having lunch, allegedly because he was sitting at the wrong corner of the restaurant and was a coronavirus risk. Obviously, a propaganda attack. But then it turned out, I'm having a feeling that it's more like he's being questioned over his major scandal, which is big nothing. But then the Interior Minister, Nakachulev, immediately afterwards said, we're going to continue doing this. So he basically implied that he's going to get Zaev. So very likely that Zaev is going to be not perhaps walked, but he's going to be invited, nicely into a police station for a serious crime, unlike Mickovsky, but more like Donchev, because he's being mentioned in the Donchev recording, in this Davidovic, Montenegrin businessman recording.
Right.
So there's much more tangible stuff there. So it's very likely that before the elections, Zaev is going to be invited to a police station. He's going to refuse to go there. Well, he's going to be invited again, more sternly. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. But it's, and we're also waiting for new recordings to drop. Mickovsky was cryptic during the debate today. He said, so this lawyer, one of the lawyers who was very corrupt in the racket scandal. Zaev says no. So Mickovsky made sure to ask him again, well, are you sure you don't know him? So, which, tells me that by the time this podcast drops, we'll probably have footage of Zaev with the lawyer or something like that. So there's going to be a lot, more of this, obviously, to come, I expect, based on experience.
Well, of course, and my goodness, questioning Miskolsky for sitting in the wrong part of a restaurant versus Dan Donchev for trying to extort millions and all of the other scandals, which leads me to ask, and I know I saw something just recently in the media on the so-called colorful revolutionaries. We know that Zaev has privately basically told his friends that the so-called colorful revolutionaries were his, in his pocket, that essentially they're fools. Of course, we know that they're fools because they're colorful revolutionaries. But has there been, and we've talked about this over the years, how they championed the so-called revolution that brought Zaev to power. They championed the name change. Uh, have they, during this election season, have the so-called colorful revolutionaries been visible, active, talkative? What's their, where are they in this whole thing?
No, no, they're so thoroughly humiliated after Katica Janova and the scandals, and Zaev, just for supporting Zaev, for
Yeah.
taking government jobs and perks. But yeah, the latest Vimero is campaigning. I don't really like this, but I guess this is how you win. In the downtown Skopje district, which has a lot of these urban types, which we see now in toppling statues in the U.S. as well, and trying to erase your history as well. So Vimero is running a former colorful revolutionary who quickly left the movement, Gordana Siljanovska, who was their
Ran for president.
presidential candidate. So, this is Vimero's outreach to these people, and some of the leaks which are, obviously coordinated through Vimero. Now we have another one in which Zaev is disparaging the colored revolution, says, I'll have everybody in them shuto I rogato. That means, those with the horns and those who are lame and crippled. It means like even the worst, the refuse of them. I'm going to bring them in my coalition, and then I'm going to expletive their mothers.
Lovely.
So he means the fact that they're with me, I'm going to basically corrupt them. They will not be an independent movement. I will co-opt them. He's joking, he's mocking their percentages. People, there was apparently some poll. How do you support SDSM or the colored revolution? And like 5% said, colored revolution over SDSM. So he's mocking them on this. So Vimero is obviously campaigning to at least discourage them from voting. If not, maybe even possibly even vote for Vimero. They also have two other options they can vote for, Levica and Tvoja. One is a far left but more nationalist party, which would apparently, if they win seats, side with Vimero. The other is literally an offshoot of SDSM, which, if they win seats in parliament, which is less likely, they will side with SDSM again. So basically the colored revolution people are now spoiled for choice. They can sit it out. They can vote Vimero, SDSM, Levica, Tvoja, whichever flavor they want. The delicate urban flowers we have here. Basically Vimero is, the leaks which are coming out are, showing Zaev as corrupt, showing Zaev as willing to go to bed with Russia. Obviously a signal to the United States that once you have hired as your subcontractor here a person who is willing to sell his own nation down the river, it's a very short step for him to also sell the allegiance to NATO and the Western Alliance and, what remains of the West. He will side with Russia tomorrow for a few dollars more once, you stop paying him. This is the message of the Davidovich recording. This person has obviously zero principle and scruples, and he will abandon you at the drop of the hat. Another message is, he's corrupt, he's untrustworthy, and you all on the left, the idealistic left, have been idiots to ever support him or Katica Janova.
Right, and we also know from Zaev's past being pranked by the two famous Russian pranksters, that he is more than willing to hand out personal cell phone numbers of leaders that he knows, which could include, a lot of the NATO officials and whatnot. Going back to the colorful revolutionaries, there, it's just a side comment. It's fascinating to me how your colorful revolutionaries and our current crop of ignorant miscreants and punks, majority, the two of them that were just filmed having doused a statue of George Washington with red paint, They all have the guys at least, all have man buns, and I don't quite understand that. It's the one defining characteristic of these revolutionaries around the world. The guys, at least, they're thin, they're white, and they have man buns. And, they've never changed a tire on a car before. They wouldn't know how to drive a manual transmission. They're just, in every sense of the word, losers. So, it'll be interesting to see what your colorful revolutionaries do in this upcoming election, if they'll even go out to vote. And speaking of that, so we have the coronavirus raging, as we talked about in the opening monologue. That's still going on. What is that going to do in terms of voter turnout? I see that Miskowski's father was just diagnosed with COVID, or was it his mother?
Both of them.
His mother was previously, his father was now. I see our friend Antonio Milishowski is in the hospital
Antonio is now in the hospital. He says, I'm fine, not some fever, not difficulties breathing, but his mother is a doctor and she was diagnosed with COVID.
Yeah, and we've seen, the mayor of Kumanovo, Zakiri, the vice president of Citizen, and his whole family had been diagnosed. We're in hospital. I assume they're out of hospital now.
They're out.
Good. Good.
He had some testing message like, I'm going to disappoint those who were hoping I was going to die, blah, blah.
Now, we are on record. We wished him, and we don't wish anybody to suffer through this. We wished him and his family well, and we're glad he's out of the hospital. But nevertheless, the virus, the fear of the virus, is going to definitely have an impact on voter turnout. I see that the Election Commission put forward the voter list of some 1.8 million voters, which of course we know is all off, but Macedonia hasn't had a census since 2002, nearly 2 decades. And elections on a Wednesday, again, which we talked about last week, which is just odd. Normally elections in Macedonia, elections in Europe are held on Sundays. I assume that the government will give people time off to vote, assuming they want to vote. And then there's the International Monitoring Mission, ODIHR. I don't know if they're going to have how many short-term observers they're going to have in there or not. I don't know if we've seen anything about
7 or 8, or I don't know if short.
I thought those are the long-term. Long-term are 7 or 8. I don't know about the short-term.
Yeah. It's a joke.
Not much. So, turnout. It'll be low.
We had the Serbs vote. It was not that low, especially considering that the opposition boycotted, half of the opposition boycotted the elections. So the capital, their colored revolutionary urban delicate flowers, they didn't vote. Belgrade voted at 35%. But the rest of the country voted okay. I think they cracked 50%.
Wow.
Which under these circumstances, if the opposition hadn't boycotted, they would have been over 60. It was completely a no contest vote. So ours is obviously going to be very, narrow. So even too narrow for my liking. So I think there is going to be a turnout. I think the polls voted now, and I think they also had like a solid turnout, not the best, but it was not a disaster. It was not like 20%. So we'll see what the Albanians do. The way things stand, they can fly into Macedonia,
but they can't get back.
This is a big deal for then they can't come back.
So I don't know if they'll actually do that, because they're earning money outside of Macedonia. So why would they? Why would they give up that position? That's a very good point. Why would they give up their earning potential to fly into Macedonia to be stuck? Now that's something that
it could change by the election day, but the way things stand right now, you wouldn't want to plan for. And usually Macedonians would have low turnout in July, August because of vacation. So Albanians usually wanted summer elections because their diaspora thinks that vacation constitutes going to their villages and buying yourself a bride and shooting Kalashnikovs into the air, while Macedonians would go to Greece for proper vacation. But now we can't go to Greece, and Albanians can't come here. So it's a weird situation. But ultimately, without OSCE observers, and even with them, Zaev could just, we could have SDSM and DUI fighting to who would staff more ballots into the Albanian villages, again, getting them to 90% turnout. And it's not excluded, unless they're feigning all this fight between them just to score, to build up their reputation. If they are actually, in an existential fight, we had this before in 2008. We had Albanian parties turn machine guns on each other, and SDSM is now a de facto Albanian party contender. They could actually, have a serious confrontation if they both want to stuff ballots in the Albanian districts with, if the diaspora doesn't come and turn out their, Albanian villages 20%, they really could, start shooting at each other.
Yeah, well, actually, Euronews clarified what the party of Zoran Zaev is called in their article today. It's the, what was it, North Macedonian Social Democratic League, which is fascinating because it's a mishmash of it's anyway. So, but to be clear, the officially it's SDSM, which before 1991 was the League of Communists of Macedonia. So I think that's where they got the word league in that title. But going back to the issue of logistics and voting and whatnot, you mentioned that Macedonians aren't really going on vacation, especially not to Greece right now. The last time I remember, and again, this is point of personal pride, if I might, that I've forgotten more than most of the so-called experts will ever know about Macedonia. And of course, I do remember the only time that I think in Macedonia's history as an independent nation state that there have been July elections was July 4, 2006. And so that's the only July election I can remember. There might have been some in the early 90s before I got there, but and I don't remember what the turnout was on in those elections. And that's when Vumero came back into power after having been in power from 98 to 2002. And then SDSM came back 2002, 2006. So anyway, well, we got 2 weeks between now and then. We'll follow the elections. We've kind of exhausted the upcoming elections, the scandals, the coronavirus, etc. Let's kind of pivot a little bit to other Macedonia-related issues. This is the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast, after all, and look at a couple of things that happened outside of Macedonia. First, we had the elections, the primary elections in the state of New York, and Elliot Engel, 31 years in the United States Congress, really an institutional part of Team Albania, and the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Faced a primary challenge. He is down big time. They're still counting votes due to the coronavirus. They had a lot of mail-in ballots coming in. He's down big time to basically a Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez type of challenger, far left. But anyway, that's going to hurt Team Albania. And then, not too far away from him in New York is Carolyn Maloney, who is part of Team Greece. And she's been in Congress forever, and her challenger... I don't know as much about her challenger, but she's down. They're still waiting for the votes to come in. Next time we record a podcast, we'll know whether or not Elliot Engel and Carolyn Maloney are still going to be in the Congress cheering on Albania and Greece. Closer to home, we had the president of Kosovo, Hashim Thaci, he wasn't indicted. He was charged, I think, by I don't know what the group is called. It's out of The Hague, part of the court there. Yeah. That charged him with war crimes, killing a murder of 100 people way back during the war in 1999, 98, 99. So he was about ready to get on a plane and fly to Washington, D.C. To meet with Vučić at the behest of Ambassador Richard Grenell, who is the kind of a bit uncouth and not very diplomatic, but certainly he has the president's ear, President Trump's ear.
Yep.
various positions. I actually don't even know what his current position is within the Trump administration. But anyway,
The only diplomat Trump still trusts.
exactly, yeah. So anyway, Grinnell was going to try and bring them together to work out some sort of deal, but after that, Thacci said no. The whole thing fell apart. Now Thacci came out with a statement, I think it was yesterday, basically saying that if he is formally indicted, and that won't happen until October, I believe, according to the timeline, then he'll step down. Anyway, all of that throws the whole Kosovo-Serbia talks into... there's a big question mark hanging over that. But it also, just goes to show you, and as I tweeted out, I sure wish Ali Ahmeti, I wish Hashim Thacci would go to The Hague and stay, and I wish Ali Ahmeti would join him, because I really get sick and tired of this coddling, almost, of the Albanian leadership in the region. It's almost as if they present themselves as spotless and clean and saintly and angelic, etc., and they fought in wars.
It's all very good, but these are okay victories. But then the way things are going, it's very likely that Biden is going to be the next president, and the extent to which he was personally involved in supporting both the Albanian cause and especially the Macedonian name change. He was personally invested as vice president. I'm 100% sure that the colored revolution wouldn't happen without his personal pressure and involvement. You have your own Biden stories. So
yes.
I see all the Kosovo, Bosnian, Muslim Balkan folks so out in support of Biden that they're obvious. I mean, he's demented. He doesn't know what
non compos mentis is the Latin term.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but he'll just fill the State Department with, not that anybody has been purged. I mean, they're all now giving lip service to Trump for a few more months, except for Grinnell. But once Biden is president, they're all gonna, come out fully in support of whatever the Clinton-Biden policy was in the region, which was obviously, as you said, uncritical support for warlords such as Thacci. Even the charge against him, it's such a joke because it comes 20 years too late. I mean, there is obviously doesn't constitute any justice for the people he killed, either Serbs or Albanians, whatever. It was just used to sabotage Grinnell's little event when he thought he's going to resolve the Kosovo issue, and for some reason, I guess, believed that this is going to affect elections in the United States. Why exactly, I don't know.
Neither do I.
And, even consider, let's say Trump is a pro-Serbian president, pro-Russian, as he was portrayed, and at least a break with this Clintonite policy in the region. And even then, the Serbs didn't ask for much. They said, give us half a city in Kosovo, give us a bunch of villages, maybe one reservoir, which is important there, or the Trepča mine, or some portion of both, of either. And in exchange, they didn't say so, but it was implied they're going to recognize Kosovo, which is a major give on their part. They would get something like Crimea for Putin. He can say, okay, I snatched some territory from Kosovo in exchange for, what was already given away, like their recognition. And even this, so they didn't ask, give us half of Kosovo. They didn't ask, give us the whole of Kosovo under some weird sovereignty deal, withdraw the American recognition of independence of Kosovo, which Trump could easily be persuaded to do, just, if just to spite the Clintons. Mm-hmm. They asked for a relatively modest trade, and to resolve the issue. And even this was sabotaged, obviously, by deep state people and who were objecting to Grinnell's replacement of the government in Kosovo, which was going to block this deal. So obviously, people like Palmer, they were not on board with the changing of the government in Kosovo. So even this Serbs didn't get and Trump didn't deliver. And, once Biden is there, it's going to be a complete reversal, and business as usual, and Albanians are going to dramatically overreach and, I mean, America could impose sanctions on Serbia or, crazy stuff like that. So, yeah, okay. I mean, I'm happy about Engel. I'm very happy that, the left has cultivated minority voters and then increased their numbers to win over the right. And now that the minorities are no longer minorities
Right.
and they don't need people like Engel anymore. And soon, he's Jewish, I think, so it's not going to be very pleasant for him living in the new New York. But it's a very, interesting development. What is happening to the left, and we keep warning SDSM about this, that sooner or later they're not going to be coddled by the Albanians once the Albanians have. I mean, look what they're doing to us as a minority. Imagine when they reach some parity levels. But I don't think, they served their role, they did their damage to the region, and unless Trump wins, and even if Trump wins with his lack of control over the diplomatic service, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's another issue we've talked about many times before, and we'll continue to talk about again. But that's for a later time. So anyway, we're running a bit long, so why don't we wrap it up now, and we'll do probably one more podcast in here between now and the elections. And always.
And then obviously an election podcast.
An election pod, yes, right.
Once the results are in.
Exactly. So, all right. I think that's a full wrap.
Yep. Take care with all the fires out there and all the Black Lives Matter protesters and all the plagues we forgot to mention in full.
Yes.
At the beginning.
But also, and I know since you have lived here, and especially since you've lived in Washington, D.C., and you have some affinity for us still, wish our listeners, at least here in the United States, a very happy 4th of July, American Independence Day coming up.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good note.
No place like... Yeah, there is definitely no place like the U.S.
Right.
For better and reasons,
despite our
unfortunately.
faults,
For worse, but yeah.
All right.
Words and all.
Yep. Good talking to you, Cvetin.
Okay, buddy. You too. Take care.